Russia's bloody war on Ukraine entered its 44th day on Friday. Vladimir Putin's forces continued their murderous missile and artillery attacks. In the latest atrocity in Kramatorsk, a missile struck a train station full of civilians trying to evacuate the east of the country. At least 50 people were killed, including children. More than 100 have been injured. Today, Ukrainian members of Parliament and human rights activists held a virtual press conference with Canadian journalists. Oleksandra Ustinova is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, and she joins us now. Madam Ustinova, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting.
We're seeing these horrific images of the attack on the train station in the east of the country, and we know that this happens while people are trying to evacuate the east and the south of the country. What is the situation? How would you describe the situation right now?
What we see happening in Ukraine now is not about the war anymore. This is a genocide, because the Russians clearly knew that the evacuation trains were supposed to be going from Kramatorsk, where the attack happened, to the western part of the country. And those are always children and women who are being evacuated. So unfortunately, we see now them getting very brutal, trying to get as many civilians as they can. And this looks like a genocide, not just a war for them. We've seen the footage from Bucha that shocked, I think, all the world. We've seen all the reports of how women were raped. I just can give you one of the examples. A 14-year-old girl was raped by 5 Russian soldiers. She's pregnant now. An 11-year-old boy was raped in front of his mother. They tied her so she can watch him being raped by the Russian soldiers. So this is not about the war. This is about the genocide. People are being killed just because they speak Ukrainian, just because they are Ukrainians. And shooting today and bombing today Kramatorsk was exactly an example that shows that the Russians just literally want to destroy the Ukrainian nation, and it's not about just winning the war.
On the evacuation, I mean, there is an anticipation of a Russian offensive in the east, and it's still ongoing in the south. And as you mentioned, you're trying to evacuate civilians, innocent civilians, from the east. You told a story, a personal experience of someone you know closely, and the kind of human cost and human lives in terms of trying to evacuate innocent civilians.
Unfortunately, I will be honest to say that the majority of the international organizations who are supposed and trained to do the evacuation corridors, had fled the country the second day of war. We don't have the International Red Cross here on the ground. We don't have OSCE. We don't have one of the UN organizations working in Ukraine to help evacuate people. That's why it ends up that we have literally civilians picking up their cars and going without knowing how to do that correctly, how to hide from this shelling and bombing, how to drive these corridors, are trying to evacuate people. A very close friend of mine, Bogdan Stefanishin, was killed 10 days ago. He's a husband of my colleague, the member of the Ukrainian Parliament, and my very good friend. She sits right next to me in the Parliament. He had a direct shot from with the rocket. It was difficult to explain to the kids that there was literally nothing left from their dad, nothing but ashes. And that's because he, as a civilian, was trying to evacuate people from Chernihiv. He did it before in Bucha because there was nobody who could have done that professionally. Because again, Red Cross, OSCE, and all the other organizations that are supposed to help and are fundraising hundreds of millions of dollars now to do that, fled the country. So that's why people like Bogdan, who are heroes now, took their cars and just went to drive people out of that hell. He managed to do it in Bucha, but unfortunately he was killed at Chernihiv.
Can we talk about the sanctions? You mentioned in your press conference this morning, you had some very harsh words about how you say the sanctions are just not working. We saw new sanctions announced by Canada, by the EU, by the United States, but you have an example of how they're not working.
I will give you one of the examples. One of the first days of war, I think it was the first week of war, it was a loud announcement that SWIFT was cut off, that the Russian banks were cut off from SWIFT, which is the international transference system. Well, unfortunately, it was only 7 out of more than 300 banks in Russia that were cut off from the SWIFT, which means you basically transfer the accounts to another bank and that is it. This is a huge loophole. This is not sanctioning.
Right.
It would be the same as we'll let's say tell Levi's to withdraw from Russia, which they did. But they would say, okay, we'll do that, but we will leave just jeans selling. So we're going to take all the merchandise, but we'll leave jeans there. So this is the same that is happening now with the sanctions. One of the examples is the energy sector. So I've been asking the United States and Canada to take the leading role and support the EU because they're more dependent on oil and gas from Russia.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we've seen EU only take a total ban on oil on coal. Yeah, but unfortunately, coal is a very small amount of the budget that Russia has. Just to compare, it's 9 billion per year, comparing to more than 200 billions for oil. So that's why, unfortunately, we need the total visa ban. We have to freeze and seize all the assets of those people who are under investigation or who are under sanctions now, because these people are under sanctions, but their businesses are not. Okay. They're still functioning in US, in EU, and Canada, and in a lot of Western countries.
Yesterday in the Canadian budget, there was a federal budget here in Canada, and Canada announced up to $500 million in new money to help buy lethal weapons, heavy weapons for Ukraine. We also announced up to $1 billion for what's called a financial instrument to go through the International Monetary Fund. Your reactions to what Canada has been doing so far?
I'm very grateful for the support of the Canadian government, and I know this has been unprecedented. We have never seen the support like that to any other country. But unfortunately, again, I keep saying this is not enough and we need more. Yeah. The 500 million that were allocated to support Ukraine is a very, very small amount of what is needed. And it is very important to understand that the most important word for Ukrainians now is ASAP. So we need it now, not in a month or 2 months.
On that note, I just want to ask you something. We've been told that the NATO countries are not advertising when they do get you heavy equipment and heavy weaponry, but we did see images of the Czech Republic sending railway cars full of heavy tanks to Ukraine. So you are receiving some of the heavy weapons that you need?
Unfortunately, we are not receiving the exact weapons that we are asking about. We are very vocal and we are very direct on what we need. Those are the air defense system, MLRS, that we keep talking about. This is to protect the civilians. It protects cities from being shelled. And we need the jets, because the jets can stop the jets from bombing the cities. This is the #1 priority for us. So yes, we do receive tanks, we do receive weapons, but we are not receiving the one we keep asking about, and those are the priorities for us.
Okay, Madame Ustinova, I want to thank you very much, and we will stay in contact, and thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you.